St. Patrick's Day is celebrated all over the world, so today we're going to have a look at the life of St. Patrick and see how being resilient helped him throughout his life. G'wit and welcome back to the channel, guys. So with Patrick's Day fast approaching, I thought it would only be appropriate to look at St. Patrick and how we can learn from his resilience and apply it to our lives too. So first off, I consider myself a bit of a history nerd, so it's important to me to know where we get the information on St. Patrick. And it's pretty miraculous that we actually have two primary sources on St. Patrick. One is called a confessio and the other is, and I'm going to butcher this word, the estola. Primary sources means that Patrick probably wrote these things himself. And this is pretty amazing because a lot of the Roman emperors around that time don't have primary sources on them. And they're the emperors of Rome. So straight off with these primary sources, we do know one thing, that Patrick did exist. Now most of us might be familiar with the story that Patrick was born somewhere in Roman Britain and he was brought over to Ireland as a slave. The thing is though, we don't know exactly where he's from because Roman Britain at the time comprised parts of Scotland and Wales and England. And the place that Patrick mentions that he was from isn't actually anywhere near the sea, so most historians would say it was probably Wales, but we don't know. Now when Patrick was kidnapped, whoever it was by, he was only 16 years old. Can you imagine the fear and the terror of being robbed from your safety, from your home, to be brought over to a completely different place, completely different culture, and way worse weather? Patrick was by no means poor. His father was actually a Roman official, a minor one, and his grandfather was a priest. While Patrick was in captivity, he became a sheep herder and he had to stand out in the hills of Ireland in the snow and the ice and the rain. Can you imagine? Stand out in a field in the middle of January in the freezing cold. It gets even crazier because he said that at this time, during this horrible circumstance, that he actually began to reconnect with God. He says that he felt God's love more and more, eventually praying up to 100 times a day and as much at night. Now you might think 100 times a day, I'll never be able to do that. I've never prayed 100 times a day, but prayer can be something as simple as just thinking thoughts towards God. Now Patrick's situation has not changed, but yet he begins to feel better, and that's the power of a positive attitude. A lot of times we let our circumstances dictate how we're feeling. But if you remember from our series on happiness, happiness is not out there, it's in here. Patrick spent about 6 years in captivity, which I find funny because 6 years is the general same time in secondary school and most students kind of feel like that's captivity. So eventually after 6 years, Patrick says that he heard a voice telling him that he had fasted well and there was a ship waiting for him 200 miles away. Listen, I've read the Bible and I've seen God do some head-scratching stuff in my opinion, but to ask a fella to travel 200 miles to get to a boat when there is nowhere in Ireland that's more than 60 miles away from the coastline, that's a new one. Maybe it was the only boat going in the direction at the time. Or maybe Patrick is like me and a journey to go downstairs to make a cup of tea seems like miles. A lot of historians do say that the journey probably took place to go from Antrim to Wexford, which kind of makes sense because Wexford would have been closer to the next land. So you think if you hear a voice telling you to go get a boat, you walk 200 miles and there's a boat there, that everything's going to be easy sailing from there on, excuse the pun. But they wouldn't even let him on the boat. And this is a perfect example of Patrick's perseverance. He didn't give up. He went back and he prayed to God, like his source of strength was God. And that's exactly what we need to do during tough times. We need to focus on our strengths. What are we good at? What can we do in this situation? And one thing Patrick could do, and do it well, was pray. And Patrick's prayer to God wasn't one of, oh, why are you mocking me, God, making me walk so far and filling up the boat with other people. It was a prayer that filled him with joy and encouragement. Eventually the guys did let him on the boat, but you can see from Patrick's writing how he maintained that positive attitude and it helped him to be resilient. So now he's on the boat and he just goes home, right? Well, actually the journey to wherever he went was 3 days, but then he spent 28 days walking through the wilderness. Eventually they begin to starve, you know, because 28 days, and the group he was traveling with were like, hey, we're starving, aren't you a Christian? Why doesn't your God save us? Patrick didn't get discouraged, he prayed, and a herd of pigs showed up, and they had food. Personally, I'd have expected Patrick's trials to have ended long ago, at least once he got on the boat. But Patrick was beyond complaining, and he saw these trials as opportunities to trust in God. Patrick never lost his faith, no matter the circumstance. The more we trust God, the more we can come to understand that God wants us to succeed more than we do ourselves. And that belief can help you through the toughest times, just like it helped St. Patrick. According to his confessio, that was not the end of his trials either. He had loads more, but basically to follow the same pattern. There's a problem, Patrick maintains his faith, he prays, gets filled with joy, and something good happens. Eventually, he managed to return to his family after a few years. And after a while spent with his family, he begins to have these visions of a man who comes to him with letters. And when he opens up the letters, he hears the voice of the Irish calling him back to Ireland. And he recounts several more times of God speaking to him and encouraging him, mainly in his dreams, which shows me how important it is to get a good night's sleep. And we all know what happens next. Eventually, Patrick does heed the call. He studies to become a bishop and he returns to Ireland. Now, this was not the end of his trials. He had loads more in Ireland, but he also helped thousands of people come to know God. You see, it was during this time that Patrick wrote those 2 letters, and those 2 letters were basically to defend himself against accusations. No matter who you are, no matter what you do, not everybody is going to like you, and for whatever reason, some people will want to tear you down. That's why it's always important that we surround ourselves with good people who are there to encourage us and to support us and remind us of who we really are. Patrick's writings are really interesting because he's brutally honest about his feelings and his friendship with God. Despite the horrible circumstances of his teenage years, it was at that time that he was able to develop that friendship with God. Even though his problems never magically disappeared, he was able to deal with them when they came and experience God's love and joy in his life. He even says that his experiences were worth it because of how amazing his friendship with God became. That's insane to me, and I'm glad I don't have to go through any of that to have a great friendship with God. If you'd like to have the same faith and positivity in the face of trials and danger as Patrick did, then I encourage you to start your own friendship with God. The same God that kept Patrick happy and safe is the same one that you can talk to today. Personally, I see a lot of similarities between my friendship with God and Patrick's friendship with God. God is always faithful to me and a comfort to me when I need it too. Patrick's friendship with God helped him through the toughest times in his life, and it can help you too. So there's lots of ways that we can develop our friendship with God. We can read the Bible, we can pray, or we can talk to people who already have that friendship with God. So I'd encourage you to do that and allow Patrick's story to encourage you when you're going through a tough time, like having to make a cup of tea downstairs. See you in the next video. Bye bye. If you'd like to learn how to be more resilient like St. Patrick was, we've loads of videos that cover the topic of resilience. If you'd like to learn more about having a friendship with God, now we've a bunch of videos on our channel that can help you with that too. And sure, if you haven't done it already, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you can get our new videos when they do come out. Anyways, thanks again for watching.